The main purpose of the revision is to bring the standard up to date and to prepare it for another 10, 15, 25 years. You have to remember that the current version of the standard is essentially unchanged from the late 1990s, when the year 2000 version of ISO 9001 was actually developed. And a lot has happened since the year 2000. If we think back as to all the things that have happened in wireless internet access, in cloud computing, in information security questions, a lot of good things that will help organizations to be able to use more modern technologies to manage their systems, but also to deal with more modern technologies and greater user expectations for the products that the organizations are providing. So essentially the reason we're revising the standard is to bring it up to date, also to align it and to help organizations who want to have integrated management systems that are more aligned to the way they do business, and which will help them to have a single management system that addresses topics such as quality, the environment, health and safety, energy management, and so on. So we've been working very, very closely with our other colleagues within ISO, who are responsible for the other management system standards, to come up with a common structure and a common text that can be used with appropriate, what we call discipline-specific additions, in our case additions that are specific to the quality discipline, to enable organizations to move forward in that way. Well, we hope that it will help organizations to really integrate quality management into their day-to-day operations. We've tried to make the standard more pragmatic. In other words, using simple language, much simpler language than we had used in the previous versions, but with a stronger focus on meeting customer needs and expectations. So we've tried to be less prescriptive. The way that every organization operates will be very, very different if it is, for example, a nuclear power plant compared with a small shop selling office supplies on the corner. So in that respect, we put a lot of emphasis on what we call the context of the organization. What is their situation? Are they a big organization providing very high risk, complex products to a very demanding market, or are they a very simple, possibly small service organization providing low risk services to their customers? The context in which each of those works is very different, and so their management system will be very different. Now that's always been the case, but this time in this revision we've really tried to put an emphasis on that. We've also put a lot of emphasis on the concept of risk. That doesn't mean we're requiring a formal risk management, but it means that we are encouraging organizations, and in some cases requiring them, to think about the risks involved in what they are doing. Think about the risks involved in the different processes, and what is the risk of that process generating, in the case of quality management, a non-conforming product. And the same thing applies to environmental management, and our colleagues in Technical Committee 207 are using this same basic structure, so that when we talk about process management within an organization should be thinking, what is the risk of this process generating non-conforming product, which is the ISO 9001 perspective, but also what's the risk of this generating significant environmental impact, the 14001 perspective, or what is the risk to health and safety associated with this process, which would be the OSHA's 18001 perspective. So I think what we will be doing is introducing a new way of thinking. Organisations who have existing management systems will probably not see a lot of new requirements, but what they will see is that a lot of the existing requirements have been transformed into a new structure. In some cases have been reworded, and we hope that this rewording will make life more simple, not necessarily easier, but more simple for organisations to understand, with a focus of achieving what we call the expected outcome of the quality management system, which is consistent, conforming product being supplied to the customer. Yes, there will be an impact on certification bodies and on auditors. What we have seen over recent years is that some auditors, some certification bodies still insist on just looking at documentation, just looking with a very narrow view about meeting the requirements of individual elements of the standard. And so they are looking, is there a quality manual? Yes. Is there a quality policy? Yes. Is the organisation managing the competence of its people with training if necessary? Tick. Yes. Are the equipment calibrated? The measuring equipment? And so on. But without taking a more holistic view and saying, does all of this, all of these things that the organisation is doing, is that providing confidence in the conformity of the product that they are supplying? Now, we are faced with a balancing act when we write the standard. The more prescriptive the standard, the more we are tying people's hands and saying you must have a procedure for this and you must have records for that, and it makes the standard really quite bureaucratic. What we want to do is to give more flexibility. Of course, a nuclear power plant or an aerospace company will need to have a lot of documented procedures. They will need to pay a lot of attention to competence. They will need to ensure very, very strict control of their measuring equipment, because that's the situation in which they operate. That's their organisational context. But a small family-run business providing non-critical services to a local community, for example, won't need that degree of sophistication or that degree of complexity. And so we need, when we are writing generic requirements, that does give flexibility, which also opens up the possibility for abuse. Now, the role of the certification body is a very, very important one. The certification body has to have the knowledge and, in many cases, good old-fashioned common sense to be able to understand the way in which the certified organisation operates, to understand that certified organisation's context, what is important, what is not important, what may need to be documented because of the risks associated with that process, or because the customer requires it, or because there may be a statutory or a regulatory requirement related to that, and make sure that the organisation, the way the organisation has chosen to manage its business and to manage its processes, to make sure that that is effective in providing confidence in the products that the organisation is providing. So we have to get that balance right. So yes, there will be an implication for certification bodies. Certification bodies will have to be more pragmatic. They will have to understand the business of their clients much better, and there will be a responsibility on their shoulders because of the flexibility that we introduce in the standard. They will have to use the knowledge and the competence wisely to make sure that they don't go overboard and require the organisation to do many more things than the standard actually requires, and generate very bureaucratic systems on one extreme. On the other extreme, we don't want to say, well, the standard doesn't require specifically a procedure or work instruction for this, therefore the organisation doesn't need it, when in fact maybe the organisation does need it in order to be able to manage its process, to be able to provide confidence in the product that it's providing. So we will be working, when I say we, I mean ISO and Technical Committee 176, Subcommittee 2, which is responsible for the standard, ISO CASCO, which is the ISO Conformity Assessment Committee, which is responsible for writing the rules for certification, and the IAF, the International Accreditation Forum, which oversees the accreditation of certification bodies. We are working very, very closely together, and we will continue working very closely together over the next 2 or 3 years to make sure that all of the players come together and together can provide that confidence in a certified organisation's ability to meet customer needs and expectations. So I would say, please look at this proactively. As we move forward, there will be a lot of advantages. There may be some things that you will need to do differently, but together we hope that we will come up with a new standard that will stand the test of time, the way that the current ISO 9001 has been in force now since 1987 internationally. So it's been around for 26 years, and I hope that the changes we are making to the standard will allow it to have a new lease of life for the next 20 or 25 years. Of course, with some minor modifications as we go along.